Ryan Donato finally gets his extension done with the Blackhawks. I'll break down why this was a win-win deal for both sides.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jag Bushman. You can go and check me out on X at JagBushman2, but make sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way, you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. The first mini domino of the Blackhawks offseason fell last week when we saw Victor Soderstrom get traded to the Boston Bruins, but today, I would say their first official domino went down as Ryan Donato has finally signed his contract extension. He'll be back for another 4 years with a very team-friendly $4 million cap hit, and it's been a very eventful last couple of months for Donato and the Hawks to reach this point. Going back to the deadline, Donato was, seemingly available if the price was right, and given that it was such a seller's market, the way that his production was going, I personally believed that Donato was going to get dealt. But of course, that never wound up happening, as not only was a first-round pick not reportedly on the table, but neither was a second-round pick, which really surprised me. But Donato wound up staying on with the Blackhawks for the remainder of the season. The two sides have been going back in negotiations the last couple of months, but they finally get ink to the paper here today. And for Donato, I think this makes sense to stay on here for another 4 years, given what his role is going to be with the Blackhawks. He could have tested the free agent market, and I feel like if he went that route, someone probably would have given him, right around $4.55 million, I think. But there was no guarantee that was going to happen. He, obviously wouldn't know what his role would be for another franchise. And then he would also have to go and move his family once again. And he's never really been in one place safely throughout the entirety of his career thus far. Now he gets that here in Chicago, still right around what he would likely have gotten on the free agent market. And he knows he's going to be a big part of what the Blackhawks are going to be doing these next couple of years. He's very well liked by the coaching staff, by the city, by his teammates. In fact, I actually saw on the Blackhawks Instagram post that they made of Donato signing his extension, it was already liked in like 25, 30 minutes by a slew of his teammates. So obviously very well liked, very well respected from all accounts, and for good reason, right? Not only because he was probably the team MVP this season, their leading goal scorer with a career best 31 tallies, but he also just goes about his business the right way, right? He has a never say die attitude out there on the ice, hounding pucks, hard to play against in one-on-one battles, and really brought the skill game here for the Blackhawks this season, and it was absolutely much needed. 62 points, 31 assists to go along with those 31 goals in 80 games this year. As I mentioned, career highs all across the board. But maybe that's why Donato wouldn't have gotten as much money on the free agent market as I necessarily think, because, there is some concern if he's going to be able to replicate the season that he had last year, given that his prior career highs were 16 goals and 15 assists for 31 points. And that's probably why, Donato didn't command all that much at the trade deadline. That's why the Blackhawks weren't offered that first or second round pick. So makes a lot of sense, again, for both sides to come together and get this deal done. And $4 million, Blackhawks fans, with the way the salary cap is going to increase these next couple of years during the time that Donato is here, that's going to be easy money. Even if Donato never reaches 30 goals again, if he can be a consistent, 15, 20 goal scorer, 45 to 50 points, and contribute all over the ice the way that he does, if he's able to do that consistently, this contract is going to pay for itself, Blackhawks fans. I don't necessarily love the fourth year. That's kind of been the one part of these rumors that I've kind of been against, as, there were reports that Donato was offered 3 years around $3.75 million once he stayed with the Blackhawks past the trade deadline. I've mentioned I would have, I think that AAV is a no-brainer. I don't necessarily love the term. I would have been more willing to give Donato a higher AAV for a lesser term, but I don't think he probably would have been on board for that. So to me, even if I don't love the fourth year at that price, there are no complaints about this Ryan Donato extension. Let me know in the comment section below your full thoughts on Ryan Donato signing this 4x4 to remain on with the Blackhawks. One final thing that I want to bring up here, Blackhawks fans, is in an article written up by Scott Powers of The Athletic, one of the best on the Blackhawks beat. If you're not following him, if you're not subscribed to The Athletic, I really believe you're doing yourself a disservice as a Blackhawks fan. But one thing he made sure to mention in his article is that Donato is likely to be back in a top six role, very similar spot that he was for the Blackhawks last year, this upcoming season. And a reason for that is not only because of, the success that he found along with Connor Bedard, right, and making the most of his opportunity, but it's also because the Blackhawks aren't expected to be too involved in the big names in free agency come July 1st, aka Mitch Marner and Nikolai Ehlers, as well as reportedly those are two guys the Blackhawks don't necessarily think they can win with as their primary stars come postseason time. And while I'm sure there are Blackhawks fans out there thinking we can't even win in the regular season, I would like to have those types of problems. I certainly understand that, but when you're giving out that type of money on these long-term deals, these are still things you have to keep in mind. And while I do believe the Mitch Marner lack of production in the postseason is a little bit overblown, he still undoubtedly has not been what he needs to be when the games mean the most. Nikolai Ehlers has never really been a consistent postseason performer or play driver himself in his career either. So with the Blackhawks, reportedly not expecting to be in on either of those guys, expect Ryan Donato again to have a very similar role and get very similar minutes that he did this past season moving forward. Last thing I'll leave you all with, Blackhawks fans, I love this deal from Donato, even if it is for that fourth year, $4 million per year. That's easy money. What I will say, though, is if Ryan Donato is their biggest offseason forward move, bringing him back, getting this extension done, I do believe that would be a mistake. Even if you want to go and let the kids run wild and get all the opportunity in the world and develop and grow alongside one another, I firmly believe you can still do that while adding, at the bare minimum, one more skill guy in the top six to help move things along and help really ramp up and fully take advantage of the situation for Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, and the young players that are going to be on the scene. I think it would be I don't think it would be very smart to just run it back. I do believe they need a little bit more, and adding one player like maybe a Brock Besser, I don't believe that's going to hinder the development of these guys or take away from some of their minutes. If anything, I believe it would help. So I hope Donato's not bringing him back is not the only major forward move they make here this summer, but it sounds like they're not expected to be in on guys like Mitch Marner or Nikolai Ehlers. But there are my full thoughts on Ryan Donato and his 4-year extension to remain on with the Blackhawks. Again, let me know what you think of this deal down below in the comment section. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, make sure to stick with me as I'll get into a quick outlook on the rest of the Blackhawks, UFAs, and RFAs. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a great source of protein? Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Well, then go and crack into a great source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. And Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value in your protein. Plus, they're packed with fiber, help keep you feeling fuller longer. And who doesn't love a good pistachio? I know I certainly do. I could sit there literally eating them and cracking them all day long, and that satisfying feeling of opening each shell, it's like a perfect mini snack meditation. And whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids at school, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. So get snacking and get cracking right now with the snack that packs a protein punch. by visiting wonderfulpistachios.com in order to learn more. Again, that's wonderfulpistachios.com to go and check it out today. Segment 2 with Ryan Donato signing his extension in free agency just 2 weeks away, Blackhawks fans. I wanted to get into a look at the rest of the Blackhawks UFAs and RFAs and kind of go through what to expect before July 1st arrives for each and every one of them. Starting with the Blackhawks UFAs, which honestly are pretty straightforward, at least from the NHL perspective, because now that Ryan Donato has signed his extension, that's taken care of. And then Pat Maroon and Alec Martinez, two of the only other UFAs that they had, of course, both have officially retired. So the only UFAs the Blackhawks left to have to make decisions on are really guys who played down in the AHL this year, starting with Andreas Athanasiou, who was surprisingly playing games for the Rockford Ice Hogs. He, started off his Blackhawks tenure nicely in the 22-23 campaign, 40 points, 20 goals, and 20 assists in 80 games. But it's been downhill for him ever since then. Wound up playing in only 8 games with the Blackhawks this year, and when he was healthy, spent most of the year with the Rockford Ice Hogs. So this is going to be the end for Andreas Athanasiou. Appreciate you for everything you did during that 22-23 campaign, and wishing you best of luck in your future endeavors, Grease Lightning. Next up, we got Brett Seney, the Rockford Ice Hogs captain, who was a little bit injury-plagued this year as a 28-year-old, had 39 points, 10 goals, and 29 assists in 58 games. Not the type of production that he had the year prior, where he tallied 63 points in 66 games. That same season, he played up in 4 NHL games with the Blackhawks. I'm really curious what's going to happen with not only Brett Seney, but Cole Gutman and Zach Sanford as well. These have been 3 of the driving offensive pieces for the Rockford Ice Hogs the last couple of years. For Cole Gutman, he obviously started off his Blackhawks career with a bang. He tallied 6 points in his first 14 NHL games, 4 goals and 2 assists, really made an impact immediately, but after suffering a season-ending shoulder injury, he's just unfortunately fallen down in the pecking order. Wasn't a general manager, Kyle Davidson draft pick, to be brought in as a future center iceman. So has kind of been buried down in Rockford the last couple of years, but had a really nice season this year. 57 points, 23 goals, and 34 assists in 70 games. Also chipped in with 5 assists in 7 postseason games. I don't think Gutman is going to be coming back, though. I expect he'll take a look with another organization as, he's 26 years old. The way that he's been producing in the AHL, I'm sure he'd like another crack at making an NHL roster. But I'm curious what's going to happen with Zach Sanford as well. He had 43 points this last year with Chicago, 19 goals and 24 assists in 70 games. Also was great in the Calder Cup playoffs with 8 points in 7 contests. But I feel like in the similar vein as Gutman, there's not really an NHL future here for Zach Sanford. Even though he is 30 years old, maybe he recognizes that he's just an AHL guy at this point of his career, but I feel like he'd like a crack with an organization that maybe could give him a path back to the NHL. We'll see what winds up happening with those 3. Like I said, Seney, Gutman, and Zach Sanford, but all 3 of them have been huge production pieces for the Rockford Ice Hogs these last couple of years. Diving into the RFAs, starting with Philip Kurashev. His tenure with the Blackhawks assuredly has come to a close as well, given the way things went this year after bursting out onto the scene with 54 points, 18 goals, and 36 assists in 2024. Only tallied 14 points for the Blackhawks this past season in 51 games. It's going to be the end of the line for Philip Kurashev here in Chicago. Just did not have a good season whatsoever. Wyatt Kaiser, going to be interesting to see what happens with him over the next couple of weeks. I think it's a no-brainer to give him an extension as an RFA, but his name has kind of been involved in trade discussions, and we know GM Kyle Davidson likes to be active this time of the year, but Kaiser, given the season that he just had, I was very thrilled with the way that he played up in the NHL this year. Still only 22 years old, set to turn 23 in July. 3rd round pick back in 2022, had 8 points, 4 goals, and 4 assists in 57 games this year. I know those point totals won't really jump out at you, but he was definitely more comfortable on the ice, both in the defensive zone and just in transition in the offensive zone, maneuvering around, the way that he was aggressive and jumping up into the play. I really liked what I saw from Wyatt Kaiser this year. We'll see what winds up happening, though, as I've outlined many times on the show. The Blackhawks seem like they have one too many left-handed defensemen at this point in time. Arvid Soderblom is another RFA that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with him over the next few weeks. I guess the Blackhawks bring him back, but he is set to turn 26 in August, and through 86 NHL games, the guy only has 17 wins. 17, 52, and 11 record through his first 86 NHL games. Now listen, not all of that is Arvid Soderblom's fault. He hasn't had a lot of help in front of him since being up in the NHL. But at the same point in time, after getting off to such a great start in the first half of this year, he still wound up with an .898 save percentage and a .318 goals against. So still not numbers that were all that good. And it felt like it was definitely his best run in the NHL. And with Spencer Knight, now the future number one, Drew Commesso was dynamite in the last couple of months of the regular season in the Calder Cup playoffs. Who knows? Again, I expect Soderblom to be brought back, but it wouldn't be crazy to let him walk in free agency either. Louis Crevier, another guy, I think like Wyatt Kaiser, fully expect him to be brought back as an RFA. Crevier, of course, though, doesn't have the same kind of maybe trade potential as Wyatt Kaiser does this offseason, but fully expect Louis Crevier to be back as well. 24-year-old. 7th round pick in 2020. Incredible that he played 32 games up in the NHL for the Blackhawks this year and looked pretty solid in stretches, tallying 3 goals and 1 assist. Moves pretty well for a 6'7" guy. Likely to begin the year in Rockford once again, should he get brought back, but I don't really see any reason against it. The last two, it's going to be interesting. Jalen Luypen and Aku Ratu. For Luypen, he was another 7th round pick for the Blackhawks back in 2021, set to turn 23 here in just a couple of days, had 14 points, 8 goals, and 66 assists in 56 AHL games for the Ice Hogs this year, also tallied 2 assists in 7 postseason games, a decent bottom 6 speedster, but I don't really see there being much of an NHL future for Luypen, so wouldn't be surprised to see him get let go. And then for Ratu, he had 6 points, 2 goals, and 4 assists in 15 regular season games for the Ice Hogs after being acquired at the deadline from the Utah Mammoth. Got some good size and some good offensive game, but don't really see NHL future for him necessarily either, so the latter of those two, unless the Ice Hogs just really are focusing on bodies and building out the roster while they have kind of some new guys potentially coming into their top 6, wouldn't be surprised to see both Luypen and Aku Ratu move on to different organizations moving forward. But that takes care of the Blackhawks, UFAs, and RFAs. From the RFA perspective, Kaiser and Crevier, expect them to get deals. Soderblom, going to be interesting to see what happens to him. Everyone else, it's kind of up in the air right now for the Blackhawks heading into free agency, but no real major guys to worry about. We know, like I said, Kurashev's going to be gone. Athanasiou going to be gone. The rest, Cini, Gutman, Luypen, Ratu, AHL guys. So not a ton to worry about after taking care of Ryan Donato and his extension ahead of free agency, but that takes care of everyone to look out for ahead of July 1st, which is just 2 weeks away. Coming up in just a minute before I close out today's episode, still got to dive into Jake O'Brien's NHL draft profile. Real quick, just want to say thank you all for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Here to start off your day. For your second listen, go and check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Now that a Stanley Cup champion is crowned, you can listen to the final Locked On NHL Game Night of the year, recapping the Panthers going back-to-back, winning a second Stanley Cup title in a row. Go and check it out now on Locked On NHL Game Night, available on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, time to get into another 2025 NHL draft profile here on the show. And with some recent rumors that the Blackhawks could potentially be trading back from 3rd overall in the 2025 NHL draft, which I'll be talking about on tomorrow's episode. Make sure to be on the lookout for that. But with that potentially being the case, it's definitely worthwhile to get into draft profiles for guys like Brady Martin, as I did yesterday. Tomorrow, I'll also be looking into Roger McQueen. And today, I'm going to be talking about 18-year-old center Jake O'Brien, 6'2", 173 pounds. Actually turned 18 yesterday, so happy belated birthday to Jake O'Brien. And of course, he played alongside Nick Lardis and Merrick Van Acker with the Brantford Bulldogs of the Ontario Hockey League this past season, tallying 98 points, 32 goals, and 66 assists in 66 games, fifth most production of any draft-eligible player in the entire CHL, and back-to-back really solid seasons for O'Brien with the Bulldogs, as he also tallied 64 points, 13 goals, and 51 assists in 61 games during his first year in the OHL. Playmaking was still some of the best in the entire league, while the goal scoring saw a nice uptick this season as well. As far as the rankings go for O'Brien, according to the top scouts and analysts in the industry, Elite Prospects has him ranked 10th, Bob McKenzie has him 9th, Craig Button has him 11th, Tony Ferrari has him 12th, McKean's Hockey has him 11th, Daily Faceoff has him 8th, Dauber Prospects has him 11th, and as does the Hockey News. But diving into O'Brien's strengths and weaknesses, there's a lot to like about Jake O'Brien. First and foremost, though, what I got to talk about to kick things off is the playmaking. Absolutely elite. One of the best playmakers in this entire draft class. Watching his highlights and going and looking up YouTube videos, it's a lot of fun to watch, especially as a Blackhawks fan, seeing him set up Nick Lardis time and time again this year. But truly, his playmaking and his top-tier vision, the extra passes that he makes, the way that he keeps plays alive, makes it behind the back passes, incredible cross-crease dishes to set up teammates, really savvy in transition and knows how to manipulate defenders as well in order to get them to move a certain way. From a playmaking and passing aspect, Jake O'Brien, one of the best in the entire class. And he also has a strong and developing shot. I think he can shoot the puck really well, both accuracy and power-wise. And as I mentioned, went up to 32 goals in 66 games this past season, up from 13 the year prior. Definitely saw the development in his shot. And I really do think, like, he can be a good goal scorer at the next level. Not like 40 goal upside, but someone that can, beat goaltenders cleanly and keep them on their toes, not making them, keeping them guessing, not letting them, think that Jake O'Brien is going to pass every single time that he has the puck in a dangerous opportunity. He is a dynamic offensive player and has added that goal scoring ability here this season. So I really like what I see from an offensive makeup perspective. And then he pairs that with a really solid compete level for the most part. He makes, a strong 200-foot effort. I think he supports his defenders really well. If you go and watch game tape on Jake O'Brien, you'll see him like mixing it up along the boards, getting into puck battles, being feisty out there. And, for a guy who's a little bit undersized, he does pretty well in those types of battles. So I'm happy with the effort level that I see from Jake O'Brien. And then I also think overall, the way that this guy can maneuver on the power play, one of the best power play overall threats that I've seen in this class as well. And that has led to some concern from a few analysts that I've seen, as the power play, I think he had just as many power play points as he did 5-on-5 points this year. But still, the way that he's able to take advantage and get the puck to his guys like a Nick Lardis over on the cross side for a one-timer, right? His ability to recognize what the defense is doing out there. And again, if you give him that avenue to shoot it, he'll go and blow it past the goalie, glove or block or high. And if he sees a passing lane in terms of the bumper roll right out in front, or for a quick little redirect or backdoor at the other dot, he's able to make those plays as, again, well as anyone in this entire draft class, keeping defenders and goaltenders on their toes at all times. Really impressive stuff from Jake O'Brien. Easy to see why his stock, kind of like Brady Martin's, who I broke down yesterday, easy to see why both of their stock has been rising over the last couple of months. As far as weaknesses or what Jake O'Brien needs to continue to work on, I would say the number one knock on him is he just doesn't have that elite speed. He has gotten better. It is something that he's been able to develop these last couple of seasons, but he's never going to be a burner. He's never going to blow past defenders at the next level. And because of that, there's just some worry about how high his ceiling can be. But I do think with the way that he skates, there is still room for improvement. And I do think with the way that he sees the ice and the way that he recognizes plays, if he continues to develop his speed, it'll be good enough to get the job done at the NHL level, but he's going to have to keep developing that. He also definitely has to get stronger. For a kid who's 6'2", has some good size to him, to only be listed at about 170, 175 pounds. Just not going to cut it for Jake O'Brien, especially if he wants to play the center ice position and doesn't have that elite speed. He's going to have to get meatier. He's going to have to fill out that frame and just get tougher to play against and be a grown man to have success as a 200-foot player in the NHL. And then he's also going to have to keep developing at the faceoff dot. I saw that he won only 44.7% of his draws in the OHL this year. So that's certainly an aspect that he's going to have to keep working on, especially if he wants to get it done in the NHL. But in terms of continuing to develop and once he gets stronger and a little bit heavier on his stick, I do think, that is an attainable feat for Jake O'Brien. So as far as his NHL comparison and his upside that I see, I really believe he could be a productive second line center or winger at the next level. Probably 60, 65 point guy, in my opinion. I don't think he's ever going to be a full point per game type of guy, given that he doesn't have that elite speed. But I do think he has all the makings to be a really productive player. And again, he makes a good 200-foot effort. He's just a little bit undersized and doesn't really have that strength at this point in time. But again, that's certainly something that he could pack on to his frame. As far as NHL comparisons, I've seen Matt Barzal. I've seen Ryan O'Reilly as well. I've also seen Robert Thomas. I don't think Jake O'Brien, I think he's going to be a good defensive player. I don't think he's going to be like a defensive stalwart like Ryan O'Reilly was. I don't think he's rugged enough for that. Even if he does fill out his frame more, I don't think that's necessarily going to be his game. I think Brady Martin is more of the guy who's set up to be that style of center iceman, right? He has a little bit more meat on the bone and is more physical of the two, but I do believe Jake O'Brien definitely has the better skills than Brady Martin. My comparison for Jake O'Brien, Ryan Johansson, a pass-first guy who can also be a 20-goal scorer, who also can be reliable on the defensive side of things. Second-line center, but not a top-line center, but a guy you can still rely on to produce for you. That's kind of what I see for Jake O'Brien here. It's going to be interesting to see what happens between he and Brady Martin, because with the way the draft is shaping out at this point in time, it feels like, you got Schaefer and Misa as the top two, and then you have this compact group. At least I'll just stick with the center icemen. You have James Higgins, Caleb Denoyer, and Anton Frondel. It's pretty clear that that's the top group of center icemen after, Michael Misa. And then it's Brady Martin and Jake O'Brien. It's going to be really interesting between those two, which one goes first. For me, I think Jake O'Brien undoubtedly has the higher upside and will be the better playmaker at the next level. But Brady Martin is more set up to have success when it matters most, because he just is already built out like that and has that physical presence. But I do think Jake O'Brien is definitely the better playmaker and has the higher upside of the two. Again, going to be really fascinating to see which of those two guys wind up going first in this year's draft. But that's going to take care of Jake O'Brien's 2025 NHL draft profile, and we'll wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes as soon as they're uploaded each and every day. You can find me on X at JackBushman2, but check out my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey so you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.